with Monica and David, I stumbled upon the story because she was my cousin. And then once I was thinking about her in that situation and her wedding, then I pulled out and thought about the broader context and what it meant to have Down syndrome, all these different pieces. With Paper Children, it was the opposite. I started wide and then ended up with an intimate story in a very similar way. But in 2014, I read a report written by Americans for Immigrant Justice, which really outlined the crisis that unfolded that year. So in 2014, we had 70,000 unaccompanied children arrive at the border, which all that means is that they physically arrived at the border without their parents. And two things really struck me. The first was why these children were leaving. I really was not aware at the time of how horrendous the violence was in Central America, in Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, and that it was disproportionately affecting the youth. And I thought, what was very unique was in the past, even just several years prior, there would be around 6,000 kids a year, and we ended up getting close to 70,000 several years later. And as I started doing research, I realized that, for example, Nicaragua had equal levels of poverty as Honduras did in 2014, but much higher levels of violence. And it was the intersection of the two, because people often talk about the pool effect, that immigrants are drawn into America because they want something from our country, and it's basically how most of the framework is built around the way we think and talk about immigration in the U.S. And I thought it was such a wonderful opportunity to try to sidestep the politics a bit, because in this case, these children were pushed out. They were truly pushed out by the violence. And in those three countries in particular, and as we know, the problem persists and will persist for the foreseeable future, there's just a lack of government control, and the cartels and the gangs have really taken over. And so in the absence of rule of law, the kids in particular are very vulnerable. And so as I learned more about that, and in the same report, I started with the one report, then I started doing a lot of reading, and I was equally disturbed at how un-American our response felt. I think it becomes so politicized, and especially now people want to pit everything that is broken and so horrifying about immigration on the current administration. But this was actually under the Obama administration, and there was such a failure to recognize it as a humanitarian crisis. And the more I read reports from advocates saying exactly that we need to stop declaring this as a border security issue and really question, why would that many kids undertake this treacherous journey, leave home to begin with, and arrive at the border asking for protection. So that was the genesis of the project. I spent about a year doing research in immigration court. At the time, at least, you could observe, obviously without recording. And I spent a lot of time in the offices of many legal advocates, including Catholic Legal Services, which is where I ended up finding the family that was in the film. And for a while, I was filming in 3 different locations. So I was working closely with the Guatemalan Mayan Center up in Palm Beach County. So I was in Palm Beach County, I was in Allapattah, and I was in Homestead, following 3 different stories. And once I realized that this family down in Homestead not only had 4, they had the 4 siblings, we had a younger one, which I had always hoped to have a younger kid, because that is part of what made this moment in time so unique. We had younger and younger children arriving at the border, and more girls. And there's a sister in the family. And while filming, and still filming these other stories, I learned that 2 of the brothers had opposite outcomes, even though their cases were based on the same affidavit. And at that point, I stopped following the other stories and really sunk my teeth into the story of this one family.